Hi, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to talk about Pluto stationing direct, um, and some other things as well. I'm just coming out of a bit of a flu, so excuse me if I cough throughout this session a little bit. Very interesting actually, because I I got sick a few days ago and I've smashed it with very high doses of vitamin D, extremely high doses, like 40, 40 caps a day, 30 caps a day, very high, um, very high doses of several things actually, which is what helped me get through it a lot quicker. I'm mentioning that because some of you uh, maybe are not aware of those sorts of ways of treating this kind of thing, because most people will just go and get an antibiotic, etc. And there are, you know, numerous ways of healing. Now, it's very interesting that I literally went through this very deep plutonic type of intense journey for about 48 hours. It was pretty horrible. And I was revived just as Pluto stationed, which I find remarkable. And further to that, Hygeia, the goddess of health, recently went into my sixth house, my natal sixth house. And, that's just another symbol for, well, she's actually the goddess of health. And more specifically, she was the goddess of prevention. And her father, Asclepios, the, the god of medicine in Greek history, culture, mythology, he was the one that found cures for sickness. And she was the one that found the ways to prevent it. So, a very interesting relationship between the father and daughter. It is worth paying attention to transiting Hygeia in your chart. She will, she will call you. She will speak to you. Okay, so Pluto stationed direct just like hours ago. You can see there's an S still there, right? So that would mean that Pluto is moving very slowly. Let's have a quick look see actually. Where do we go? So where's Pluto? There's Pluto. So the travel rate, look at it. It's 0000, meaning it hasn't even started moving yet, folks. This is a very powerful time though, you know. Pluto is, it's like it's standing still, preparing, right, to change its direction as it appears for us here on Earth, right? That's why we have this perspective of planets going retrograde, because of our locality on Earth. That's just the astronomical explanation. But it's just always interesting to go to this page if you've got solar fire, because you can see the speed of the movement of each planet and asteroid. And it's, these astronomical technical details are very important because, the reason Pluto is at 0000, even though it's stationed direct already, is because it's the slowest moving planet. So it's going to take a while before Pluto builds up momentum and gets to 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 1 minute. That could take a couple of weeks or even more. And that's important to understand because, well, first of all, because Pluto is such a powerful force, undeniable powerful force. It spends its retrograde journey 6 months of the year. So 6 months of the year it's direct and 6 months of the year it's retrograde. That means that half of the population of people on the planet were born with Pluto retrograde and the other half were born with Pluto direct. Now, in evolutionary astrology, there's a very specific and distinctive symbolism and meaning associated to planets retrograde, whether that's via a transit or whether that's via being born with a planet uh, retrograde, natally. Now, Pluto is forming a trine to Uranus here, and Uranus is retrograde. And Venus just ingressed into Libra, her home sign. So she's forming a grand trine with Pluto and Uranus. However, she's also forming an opposition to Neptune. And this, therefore, creates a kite pattern, which is a wonderful aspect pattern. I have this natally in my chart, not with these order of planets, but I do have Venus and Pluto there. And so I know firsthand what a kite aspect pattern means, well, certainly for me in my life. Now, in this case, one thing to understand about a kite, well, obviously it's a grand trine between three planets, right? And then there's an opposition between two planets. In this case, it's Neptune and Venus. And excuse me, the the planet that creates the kite, which is Neptune in this case, this is where all the energy gets pushed into. So you've got this flow of energy, which is a great word for the air signs as well, because in this case it's an air grand trine, which is the mind, information, communication, freedom, flow of energy, movement, and so forth. And so you've got this, beautiful arrangement here that Venus is integrating, embodying the energy of Pluto, stationing direct, and Uranus in Gemini retrograde, and then Neptune in Aries retrograde. Now, I must admit, Neptune's always, a tricky energy. It's never simple to handle. And although we may have these, we may have an understanding of Neptune theoretically, and the same could be said for Uranus and Pluto, that the truth of the matter is that the outer planets, being the planets that transcend all things, are planets that the energy of those planets lies dormant, in most people. It's not that every person is completely awake to those planets and is really completely integrated with them. Perhaps many people are trying to be, and perhaps some people are, but most people are not. So, that being said, in this case, we are talking about a transiting grand trine and a kite aspect pattern, which I will circle back to in a moment because I really want to just focus on what has it meant for us to have gone through Pluto retrograde. I'm just going to get some water. Okay, so Pluto retrograde for the last 6 months. Have you felt like you've been thrown around in a washing machine, like a giant, humongous washing machine where you've just been thrown around um, emotionally, psychologically, it could be physically, spiritually, and the like? Well, that would be Pluto retrograde. Um, and then, coming through that and being thrown in the tumble dryer to dry off, that's kind of where we're at the moment, just to use a funny analogy. And obviously, for each individual, it's going to be a different experience because it depends where transiting Pluto, is moving through in your birth chart. Obviously, the common themes for all of us are matters of transformation. It could be decay, it could be the breakdown of things because Pluto acts as a force where it zooms in to the unconscious layers, or Pluto corresponds to the unconscious actually. But when it's retrograde, it somehow calls our attention internally. So the energy becomes internalized, which is the case for any planet retrograde. But with Pluto, the the volume of intensity of that experience is beyond any other planet. So it internalizes everything that it's wanting to process, right? To examine, to look at. And how does that play out? Well, it plays out based on, the context of your life. So the last 6 months, whatever has been going on, it is Pluto that has been taking you through these journeys. Now, that could be connections you've had with people, relationships, friendships, it could be work situations, whatever the case. Pluto in evolutionary astrology, when it's retrograde, it really speaks to what Jeffrey Wolf Green calls the desire to want to return back to source. And so, in the process of going through that journey of wanting to return back to source, it goes through this process where it has to eliminate the separating desires, as he calls them. The separating desires, what that means is that the soul has numerous desires, none of which are right or wrong, good or bad. They are just desires, and they are unique for every single soul. It's just that soul's journey that is seeking to evolve. And in order to evolve, we must experience everything. So there's no right or wrong. Again, my favorite quote to that is every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That is hands down one of the best quotes ever. So we go through this process when Pluto is retrograde where we are called to look at ourself, our unconscious, as much as we can, because we can't look at the entirety of our unconscious in one go. It would freak us the fuck out. We wouldn't be able to cope. There's so much there. So every time Pluto goes retrograde, it's an opportunity to access that part of our psyche, and it will obviously correspond to the context of what's going on in your life. So it can throw you around quite a bit because ultimately, because Pluto is seeking to, when it's retrograde, it takes us through a journey of wanting to return to the source. Now, for a lot of people, that'll be very unconscious, but even if it is unconscious, it still evokes experiences and situations and conditions that the person may be completely unconscious to, but those things are still going to happen. It just would mean, I guess, for a person who doesn't have this kind of knowledge or insight, I feel sorry for them actually, because they'd be feeling perhaps at a loss, feeling really struggling to make meaning, out of the difficulty or out of the chaos or out of any cataclysmic events that are showing up. One other thing that Jeff says about Pluto retrograde is that He says, keep in mind that all of us, with or without Pluto retrograde, will have this experience to one degree or another. Dissatisfaction is directly linked. Sorry, I should have read the comment before that, and I will. I'll just rewind. He says, because the retrograde Pluto tends to emphasize the desire to return to source or the need to accelerate the elimination of separating type desires, the sense of cyclic or perpetual dissatisfaction is deeper in these individuals than in those who do not have Pluto retrograde. So he's talking about people born with Pluto retrograde may indeed experience a deeper dissatisfaction with their life. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll never experience joy or happiness or moments or glimpses of joy or happiness. I have Pluto retrograde in Italy, and I'm grateful for that, even though it's extremely intense. There's you just can't bullshit with Pluto retrograde. You just can't walk a life of bullshit. You can't really allow others to bullshit you, you know. I mean, it's a learning process, so you become wiser and wiser at it. But regardless of how wise or not you are, there's this sense where you just can't tolerate this external, perhaps fabricated type of narrative that is trying to be forced upon you, let's say. You just will not tolerate that with a Pluto retrograde in Italy. So then he says, keep in mind that all of us, with or without Pluto retrograde, will have this experience to one degree or another. Dissatisfaction is directly linked to the interaction of the coexisting desires in the soul. Until all separating desires are totally eliminated, this sense of dissatisfaction is the psychological symptom or effect that originates in the desire to return to the source. Dissatisfaction allows for the progressive realization of no, it's not this, no, it's not that. So that deep sense of dissatisfaction, obviously for each individual, we would have to take into account numerous factors, right? But I'm just speaking generally. Obviously, what he's saying is that that deep process of dissatisfaction that we might go through at different times in our life is actually useful. It's actually meaningful. It actually has a bigger purpose, basically, is what he's saying. Because it is through that process of dissatisfaction that you continue to seek and to evolve. It makes sense, doesn't it, logically? If you are satisfied with everything, which who the fuck is, and if you're out there, let me know. But I do think it's fair to say that every single person experiences dissatisfaction in one way or another, some more than others. So if we were satisfied with absolutely everything, well, how would we grow? How would we evolve? How would we change? We wouldn't. So it's only common sense that we, through the experience of dissatisfaction, that we will awaken to a new possibility. We will, awaken to new desires. We will have a sense of awareness, insight, understanding of the things that we don't like, the things that we have outgrown. They don't satisfy us anymore. We feel dissatisfied with X, Y, Z. So we make a different choice. We clear a space for a new path, so to speak. And we do this in different waves. Everyone does it differently and at different times. But point being, without this experience of dissatisfaction, we actually wouldn't do that. So for the last 6 months, you may have been experiencing very intense, internalized, emotional things coming up, psychological. It could be connected to past experiences, to present experiences, whatever it is. It doesn't, it's not, it's different for everybody. But the point is that we've been through a very intensified journey the last 6 months where we have had an opportunity to examine ourselves at a deeper level. Socrates said, the examined life, now how does the quote go? An, an unexamined life is not a life worth living. The unexamined life is not a life worth living. You know, that's a very, very powerful piece of wisdom right there. So when Pluto goes retrograde, it gives us that opportunity to examine just that little bit deeper, you know, in an area of our psyche or our life. And I guess for people who, depending on where Pluto is moving through your chart as well, because it could be aspecting an angle in your chart or personal planets, which would naturally intensify. Whatever Pluto touches, it absolutely intensifies it. It asks for that energy, for that planet to go through some type of death, meaning that area of life. If it's Venus, if Pluto's on your Venus, for instance, well, clearly, you know, your whole experience of love and relating is undergoing a very profound transformative process and journey. And when Pluto's retrograde, it just magnifies everything about that planet. So, yeah, again, it just depends where Pluto's moving through your chart and whether it's, you know, making aspects to anything in your chart. That's those finer details will fine tune the process of what Pluto has meant for you in the past 6 months. But I just think about it from my own life, and without going into specifics, I can see very clearly what it has done the past 6 months for me, which is the window of where I met somebody that was, it was quite a fated type of connection, and it was a connection that was, I don't know what word to use, but I would say this upon retrospect. It was a powerful opportunity of initiation for me. Pluto retrograde the last 6 months and where it is in my chart and what it's doing to my chart and so forth. So in retrospect, now that we've just come out of the window of Pluto completing the retrograde journey, and I've cut that connection as well, I'm able to see more objectively. And it's very interesting, you know, because Venus here being opposite Neptune, now this is an opposition. It's forming a kite aspect pattern, but there's an opposition here. And what do oppositions bring to the table? They bring a sense of clarity, a sense of awareness. Now, Neptune, you know, I would never bring the words clarity and awareness in the same sentence as Neptune. To the contrary, it's the complete opposite. It's usually confusion, disappointment, and the like. Either way, because we have this grand trine with these three being in air signs, it's really pointing to clarity of the mind, you know, clarity in our thinking, in our ideas. And relative to where we've been the past 6 months, what we've been up to, what's been going on, how have we handled it? What have we really faced head on, really honestly? What have we been able to to really heal or to really understand about our self, about our psychology, about our psyche, about our soul? What have we been able to take away from the experience of the last 6 months, where we could say, you know, I've really grown in this area, you know, I've really come to learn so much more about myself because of this situation, because of that person, because of that experience, etc. So it's Yeah, look, it's for some people it would have been a pretty intensified journey. I know for me it was. It was a very Pluto experience that I had with this connection and so forth. And it was the absolute underworld of Pluto, where I was tested so much. I can't tell you how much I was tested. And I'm grateful actually for that experience, I'm really grateful. I was just thinking yesterday that um be grateful for everything that comes along, you know, the highs and the lows. It's all a gift. None of it is wasted. None of it means nothing. It's all a gift, provided you come out of maybe a dark passage, if that's what you've been through, and you're able to, rise above. You're coming out of the deep waters, Pluto, Scorpio, eighth house type of energy, the deepest waters, right? And it's like, imagine, you've been swimming in the deepest waters internally, right, with different experiences that have been going on. That may be very troubling for some people. It may be very difficult, but you may have really accelerated, in a big way, your growth, your evolution, right? But before you get there, you're coming out of these waters right now as Pluto stations direct. We've just come out of these deep fucking waters, and we are, it's like our heads just come up above the water and we can breathe again, right? It's going to be like that moving forward on a personal level. And, with Venus in this grand trine as well, this is going to be very helpful for Venus in her journey through Libra. First of all, Venus is a morning star at this point still. She is in a home sign in Libra. So she's very, very powerful in the sign of Libra. And of course, Libra speaks to relationships. And of course, so does Venus. And she's forming a trine not only to Pluto, but to Pallas Athena as well. And that's a very important detail because Pallas Athena represents the Venus morning star. Although this is the asteroid we are looking at, it is the same principle, it is the same energy. And what's Pallas Athena doing? Well, her journey has been remarkable this year. She's been conjunct Pluto all year because she went retrograde. Now, she moved away from Pluto a fair way in that I think she got to about 25 degrees of Aquarius. So she'd moved right away from Pluto. But because she went retrograde and because she's in the same sign, you can really read that as Pluto and Pallas Athena hanging around together all year. Okay, and this is while Venus is a morning star. And Pallas Athena is basically the goddess of wisdom, strategy. And Venus as a morning star is her. It's the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of war, the goddess of strategy. So in this grand trine, as Venus forms a trine to Pluto and to Pallas Athena, I'll come to Uranus in a moment and we'll talk a little bit more about Neptune as well. But just this trine between Venus and Pluto and Pallas Athena is an amazing setup. It's an amazing portal of energy for those that have been brave enough, aware enough to work through perhaps some difficult psychological, emotional, soulful issues and themes in their life the past 6 months. Well, the reward now is what's showing up here. Venus in Libra obviously is seeking to bring balance in our relationships. People mistake the sign of Libra as being balanced, completely balanced, right? Because it is the archetype that corresponds to balance. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that when a planet is in Libra that it's automatically balanced. It means that it is absolutely striving to achieve that. And there's an incredible, powerful focus to attain that in this lifetime when a planet is in that sign. And that will mean going through numerous diverse experiences in order to figure that out and to find that balance. It doesn't happen overnight. So, people who are born with Pluto in Libra, they're going to have, numerous experiences in relating and relationships, much more than the average person. They need that experience because they are ultimately trying to establish the balance in their soul with others, with the encounter and experience of others. So Pluto trine Venus here is a really powerful window, showing us moving forward, as Venus will spend about 4 weeks in Libra. That's roughly how long she spends in each sign, provided she's not retrograde. And so she's accentuating, pardon me, the Libran focus, which is, okay, well, let me just have a look at all of my relationships right now, relative to the context of Pluto having been retrograde the past 6 months. What have I achieved in the context of having confronted or being really raw, authentic, vulnerable, open to exploring, open to being initiated into new ways, new paths, open to being, maybe you attracted things into your life that were so damn difficult, and you're thinking to yourself, I thought I'd outgrown this kind of stuff. Why would I attract this type of person or this type of situation again? I thought I'd moved on. I thought I'd evolved. Well, no. Because if it's come back, it's come back. Well, let me reframe that. If it's come back, it could be that there's more work to be done, in those sorts of patterns of behavior, and or it could be, the final sort of chapter of those themes and patterns showing you that, okay, well, let's just have an one last look at how you might deal with these sorts of people, situations, experiences, conditions, and the like. And that is the test of initiation as to how much you've grown in whatever context that may be. So wisdom comes from Pallas Athena. She is conjunct Pluto, and they are both trine Venus. So there's an opportunity here to go through the next 4 weeks with Venus in Libra in her home sign as the morning star, with tremendous power and wisdom in all of your relationships, period. All of your relationships, because Venus does not only correspond to your lover, your husband or your wife or your partner, but to anyone that you have some type of relationship with, some type of connection with, professional, personal, or otherwise. So the and by the way, Pluto and Pallas Athena will be together, close enough together until the end of the year. So Venus is she's she's taking the imprint of this grand trine and this kite with her in her journey through Libra. And, grand trines generally produce creative energy, creative force, creative flow, natural talent, and creative energy. So if we want to look at the creative aspect outside of the personal, emotional, psychological, soulful, spiritual, cataclysmic, intensified journeys we've been through, or journey, we can also apply this to our creative side of life, because first of all, Venus corresponds to creativity, and so does the grand trine. So when I see a grand trine in air signs, and especially with Venus involved as well, and Pluto and Uranus, it's quite a brilliant aspect pattern, this one. It's not one we've seen before. this particular kite actually with Venus. I love this energy because it can really create a sense of inspiration of ideas, right? With your creative pursuits, your creative desires, and your creative projects, things that have been in the pipeline, things that you've been working on or want to work on. This energy, excuse me for a minute. This energy can really inspire uh, brilliant brilliant ideas from the heart as well, because it's Venus, and Venus actually connects to our heart energy as well. Remember, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and Neptune is opposite Venus here in this picture. So there's a beautiful sense of inspired, heart-centered dreams and ideals, desires, Pluto, bringing in wisdom, Pallas Athena. Neptune is the dream idealistic element, but that can produce the most beautiful art or spiritual growth, connection to source and soul. And Uranus brings in the, let me think. Well, it brings in the innovation, the something that's going to be different to maybe what you've done before. It also brings in the level of being, really authentic with what you're doing, really finding your groove, finding it could be that you've lost your mojo, so you get your mojo back, things start happening, and it all comes from an inspired level of ideas and thinking. That could be other people are inspiring you through their path, through things they are communicating and sharing with you, or things that you are listening to could be a source of inspiration at this time. It's important to keep an open mind. That's what's really important here. And Gemini is the mind. Uranus is in Gemini. And, it's the air trinity that's magnified here, which is beautiful. And Neptune, which is opposite Venus, is going to be, you could say, the catalyst or the driver, of this grand trine. So there can be inspired ideas that come to you. You might not have them all just now. It doesn't matter. Be open, be receptive. Venus is going to carry this kite energy with her for the next 4 weeks. So just be open to infinite possibilities, anything can come to you. And Neptune, brings in, well, it brings in the element of source, being inspired by the source divine creation to all things, Again, this could be creative pursuits and journeys. This could be spiritual pursuits and journeys. All of those are important in different ways for each of us at different times. So, as you can see, this, or here at least, and see the screen, this is a very inspiring type of energy moving forward. And particularly because Venus, she was in Virgo, which, look, at a basic mundane personality level, Venus in Virgo can be very difficult, right? She has some issues there, okay? But on the other hand, the sign Virgo, especially in ancient and Babylonian astrology, it has, tremendous divine energy and qualities about it. The star Spica sits in the constellation Virgo. So even though Venus may struggle in Virgo in certain ways, in relationships and things like that, she can also be go through some kind of journey of transcendence, you know, just through tapping into the divine elements of the constellation of the Virgin, Virgo, right? So there's a lot of purification that could have gone on with Venus in Virgo. However, it is her place of fall. So, you know, coming out of a place of fall, if you like, into a place of rulership, you know, they're two sort of opposing ends of the spectrum. So Venus is really happy in Libra. You know, she's extremely happy in Libra because she just wants to relate. Venus is the principle of relating, the magnetic principle of relating, meaning she just wants to connect and love and feel loved and give love and receive love and share her little moments, share what she did in her day, share what's going on in her heart, in her mind, in her soul with those that she, you know, is close to. Or she just wants to share, or she may just want to share a fucking glass of wine and a piece of cake, you know? She just wants to share. So when she's in Libra, she can naturally do that with grace and with happiness. Venus rules happiness. So in Libra, she's very, very happy lady. And as I said, as she moves forward in Libra, she's taking this imprint of this gorgeous grand trine. I guess if I was to say, with Neptune being, you know, being quite a difficult energy in this third dimension reality, um, what would be the, what's the word for it? I don't want to say warning. Warning sounds a bit heavy. Perhaps a side note to keep in mind, right, would be to just remember that, you know, Neptune can lead us to a path of disappointment and disillusionment and, you know, project all these fucking fantasies onto whatever or whomever and just be very unrealistic. So, whenever Neptune is involved in a story, in a theme, in an aspect pattern, we must always remember that those attributes of Neptune in this third dimension reality are always a potential. And so then it's up to us to be discerning and objective enough to notice if we are, you know, veering Neptune in that direction. At the highest level and the most positive level, because Neptune is where all this energy is being pushed through or channeled through, you know, there's amazing things that can come out of this kite pattern through Neptune, spiritually and creatively. I think we just need to watch the relationship dynamics, right? Because it's Neptune is opposite Venus. But because there's a grand trine in air signs involved here, we've got we've kind of got the upper leg here. Venus has got the upper leg because an opposition, first of all, can produce awareness and clarity, and air signs in a grand trine are about clarity and the mind and ideas and new ideas. So we could say that perhaps the last 6 months with Pluto being retrograde, whatever we have gone through, whatever has presented in our field for us to understand and to grow through and to die to and to be reborn, then, you know, all that energy now moving forward, there can be new ideas, crystallized form of ideas that can come through in our creativity, in our world of creativity. That can be in the actual form of the art itself, whatever type of artist you are, and or it can be in the mechanics as well of the process of what's the word, you know, for the what's the word for the external aspect of it, in terms of organizing, I'm going to do this in 4 weeks, I'm going to do this in 2 weeks, the Virgo part, right? It can be that can become crystallized as well. You just become more clear on how you wish to approach these things in your life moving forward, and you feel inspired mentally, and also you feel inspired by source because Neptune is at the kite, at creating the kite right at the bottom there. So Venus has moved away from being in Virgo. She's moved away from the opposition to Saturn, which we just had Venus opposite Saturn last weekend. And I distinctly remember that weekend because normally on a weekend I'll have a music night. At least once a week I'll have a full-on music night. Well, I'll do like 8 hours of music and dance, right? Minimum once a week. It's got to be done. And that weekend I just didn't. I wouldn't say I didn't feel like it, but I felt like focusing on some different things. And so I did. And it was very much the Venus opposite Saturn energy. And it wasn't terrible. It wasn't uncomfortable. It wasn't, I really don't want to do this, but fuck it, I'll do it anyway because I know it's good for me. It wasn't anything like that. It was more like, yeah, I feel like just having some downtime. I did a bit of reading. I looked at some inspiring type of videos. Namely, I looked at some things around light languages. This guy on Instagram is creating these beautiful little, like 30-second, 60-second videos where he'll bring in different female divinities from different cultural backgrounds, mythological backgrounds, and the like. And he, I don't know how he's done it, probably done it through AI, I'm assuming. And so he brings these beautiful images, beautiful divinities, goddesses, and he's got them speaking the light language that they connect with based on their culture and mythological background and the like. And I just came across that on the weekend when Venus was opposite Saturn, and I was just absorbing that, and it just felt so beautiful, just so beautiful to just absorb that light, those light codes and that light language. It was just a beautiful thing. Anyway, it's just an example. But, the Venus opposite Saturn in other cases for other people might have been people parting ways, through certain connections and relationships. It might have been feeling maybe a bit alone, a bit lonely, a bit isolated, Venus Saturn is never joy. That's for sure. It's never joy, but it can it can well. That sounds a bit contradictory because of what I just said with my experience. But I guess what we need to understand with that is Venus Saturn aspects in just generally speaking are don't produce joy. Okay, but it depends on, where this transit is happening in your chart. Do you have that as a natal aspect? What's going on in your life? How old are you? How many relationships have you fucking had? There's so many details that always need to be brought into, you know, the story, right? The journey, the experience at this point in life for you, for instance, right? It's never black and white, and it's not one size fits all. First of all, this chart that you see here on the screen, it has so many freaking layers behind it that you cannot see. All these different patterns and themes and layers are going on behind all these little symbols that you see. Multiple layers called, like, for example, harmonics. you know there's things going on, for instance, between Pluto and the North Node, Pluto and the Sun, blah blah blah. There's those are called arc transform harmonics, and then you got harmonics. So basically you got, imagine behind this chart you've got all these patterns, which would be like all these different sine waves and lines, moving through this chart, which are creating so many different types of energies. So nothing is as simple as it looks, and nothing is as it appears. There's always so much more. I guess I just want to finish up with addressing the collective concern around I want to try and say this without saying it in full sentence, with if I can say it like this, DGID, right? I think that's good enough for people to understand what the fuck I'm talking about. Hmm. So, look, the narrative that they paint, right? It's always, first of all, they try and sell it in some wrapped up, colorful package, right? To try and lure and attract people in under a false representation, of course, because the motivation behind it is completely fucking different to what they say, right? Most people have learnt that in the last 5 fucking years, right? If they didn't know this shit before, a lot more understand it now because they can't fucking deny it anymore. You know, we know what happened with the COVID, right? The denial around that went on for a while. Some fucking people are still in denial. That just like, that's mind-boggling to me. But anyway, the point is that it's promising in one way, I think, because first of all, Pluto in Aquarius. Now, just let me just say this: moving forward with Pluto stationing direct, we can now move forward in our, just think about it from our own soul's journey. We can progress and move forward because Pluto is stationing direct. And we can now bring into our life moving forward what what we've transformed in the last 6 months. What have we learnt? Everything I've just been talking about, the last 40 minutes, whatever it's been. We now bring that into our daily life, our experience moving forward. And we integrate that into our steps moving forward. We do that. No one else does that. No one fucking controls that. We do. That is up to us. And that, therefore, includes the choices and decisions we make with the narratives, propositions put before us. We can't, remain ignorant and stay in denial and then later, start crying about it. Everyone has a freaking choice, just like they did 5 years ago. We always do have a choice. The narrative is not going to be presented like that. It's going to be presented to the contrary. Like, you don't have any fucking choice here, buddy. You better do this or you're out. They're going to pull the same shit, right? They did 5 years ago. It's going to be the same old fucking story, except this wave is, well, well, you can't really compare them because the last wave actually killed and injured people permanently and killed people. So that's pretty fucking severe. But this next wave is about, okay, well, we couldn't kill everyone. So, whoever's left, let's just put a leash on every neck. That's basically what it's going to be. It's going to be a leash on your neck. You do this 5 times. Well, oh, no, you can't do that 6 times per year. Oh, no, 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 no. You spent this amount of money on this. Oh, no, you can't go and buy that now. Oh, you lost your license. Oh, you're in deep shit now. You can't go there. You can't go, Okay. So those are just some examples. Now, some places have already integrated this. We know one country in particular, China. It's already happening there. It's been happening for a while. And it seems that many other nations are trying to follow suit. Now, is this Pluto in Aquarius? Yeah, partly, because it's got to do with technology. But the tyranny and the malicious agendas behind it is not about Pluto in Aquarius. That's just the portion of humanity that is deeply unconscious that seeks to control. That's what that is. So I guess my thinking is, well, if you if you get caught up in the hysteria that they're trying to create, which they did 5 years ago, just talking recent history now, we can go back historically, in so many different historical periods where similar things have happened, right? So I'm just talking about the current times and the nearest historical reference point, which we are all still very aware of, and people are still fucking suffering from it, right? So I guess, if you haven't learned from that, then I really don't know what it's going to take to wake some people up. But I don't want to focus on the ones that are still not awake. I just want to focus on the ones that are, and just keep communicating and keep supporting each other. Pluto in Aquarius is going to be a stark fucking reminder that, you know what? Everyone is the fucking same. You need water, I need water. You need food, I need food. You need air, I need air. There's no one on this fucking planet that doesn't need those things. Every single person needs it. So obviously, the ultimate path for us is to unite, really to unite. And Pluto in Aquarius, it can be that at its highest potential. It can bring communities and humanity together, right? The power, Pluto, to the people, Aquarius. So there is tremendous opportunity here for many, 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 many more to wake up. And so many have. Look at all the protests all around the world in the last 5 years. Yes, there's been absolute fucking chaos and havoc taking place, more so in certain places than others, right? But we can't just focus on one thing only, and we can't allow these things to dishearten and deter us. We have been really challenged, psychologically and emotionally and physically, more in the last 5 years than in our entire life. And we're still here for those of us that are, right? And it's just important to remember that without each other, that's where we will fail. That's where we will fail if we don't step up and recognize that we are all fucking equal. That's basically it. So that's kind of like the bigger picture level, obviously, with Pluto. And Pluto will actually move, going direct. It will get as far as 5 degrees of Aquarius before it goes retrograde again, which will be in May of 2026. And, these little programs they have in play, they've had it in mind for a long time. Don't think for a second that this was just planned a year ago, or something like that. But they never planned for humanity, rising together. They planned for the opposite. These are the things that we need to remember, remind each other about. That's all it's going to take at the end of the day. Now I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I've seen how many fucking people have woken up in the last 5 years. I'm blown away. I'm hopeful. And the Venus star point that got into Libra recently. When is it? It's let's just have a quick look. She's going to go back into Libra when, let's just have, I've just forgotten the year. Um, it's about 4 years or something. Let's have a look, see. Yeah, 2030. Uh, okay. So where are we now? Uh, 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 uh. See, she's got to go back into zero Scorpio. Just one more time. Those of you that know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about. I'm sorry for those of you that are not familiar with these Venus star points, but I don't have time to go into a tutorial about this. But anyway, these star points, they stay in a sign just very quickly. They stay in one sign for about 100 years, sometimes more, okay? And what's happened is that the Scorpio star point on the wheel, which was there for about 100 years, in October of 2022, moved into Libra. Now, these move backwards in the zodiac. That's why it's gone from Scorpio into Libra. Okay. And what happens is in this 4 year period from 2022, it goes back into Scorpio just one more time. And I think that's creating, that's going to create probably 2026 is not going to be an easy year just based on that really, but we'll come back and talk about that in greater depth at another point. But what I'm looking at is here when it finally goes back into Libra, the Scorpio star point, for good, which is 2030. And that is a very hopeful thing. And it's not far away. Think about it. It's less than it's less than 6 years away. You know, it's 5 years and what, a couple of months, few months. It's not long. Think of how fucking fast the last 5 years have gone, right? In a flash, just like that. Well, same thing's going to happen here. So, and what I'm getting at is that the Venus star point moving into Libra is going to be a massive sign and symbol connecting to Venus in Libra, which is certainly about peace and balance and harmony. So that's one thing that's really promising. There's a lot more to it than that. But anyway, that's one thing. And of course, Pluto in Aquarius is the unity of humanity in their power. And that is what, how you get there? By being fucking authentic. Aquarius. Pluto in Aquarius is an authentic human family, which means realizing that we are all the same. We are one big family. We're all brothers and sisters. You don't have to love and like every single person, but it is important that we understand that we are all the same. We all will return to the same source. We all came from the same source. So, if you've been through a massive washing machine the last 6 months, it's fucked with your head. That'll be why Pluto retrograde. But um, if you've come out of it, with some recognition and clarity around the initiations that came to you, the dissatisfaction that came to you, just understand that that is purposeful, and it gives you material grounding to work onto and into something new. That's very powerful, just that in itself. So I think I will sign off and I'll see you guys very soon. Reach out if you'd like to connect with me and work on your chart in whichever way that may be. Sending you all so much love, Venus blessings, and let's go, people. Pluto direct. Let's stand together and say no. Be authentic. Be real. Be in touch with the soul. Not the fucking bullshit narrative that's being pushed or sold through fucking fear mongering. Fuck that shit. Bye for now.